All right, here to discuss today's headlines and more, political editor for the Australian newspaper, Dennis Shanahan. Dennis, what do you make of this sidelines meeting? I've listened with interest to some commentators say, well, it's a big deal. And I think there is certainly a thawing of the relationship to have a sidelines meeting. Others saying, well, it's only a sidelines meeting, it doesn't have official status. Anything with the Chinese that they will allow you to publicly confirm, I think, has a level of importance, particularly after the last few months. What do you make of it?
Look, I think it has the potential to be the beginnings of a big deal. I think that there is the parallel here with Scott Morrison meeting the Premier in Thailand, as there was with John Howard in 1997 meeting the Premier in Manila, also in the sidelines. But that paved the way for a visit to China by John Howard, where some very thorny issues were sorted out and the Australia-China relationship was put back on a smooth, even keel under John Howard. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen, but I think if you look at what Scott Morrison is saying, he's refusing to say there was any discussion of an invitation to China. He talked about he used the term, the need to develop the strategic economic relationship, the dialogue. Now, this has been, what's been missing is in these high-level meetings is that the strategic economic dialogue has been lacking. What we may have seen today was the resumption of that economic dialogue. And I think also it was interesting that Maurice Payne went out and made public remarks about human rights before the meeting with the Prime Minister. Now, again, this may seem like a silly thing to do, a presumptuous thing to do. But again, we see Scott Morrison refusing to speak about human rights, even confirm that he discussed human rights with the Chinese Premier. Again, what is being laid here are a series of markers where Australia is saying we will not be silent about human rights, but we are not going to then have a real go at you in the face-to-face public situation. So there's a building here of boundaries that are being set by Australia and China, and I can see that this is the beginning with, and of course, unfortunately, the APEC meeting has been cancelled, so that was going to be the next step. So what we may have is a leap over what was going to be the APEC meeting to a much better meeting at a later date. So I don't think, you know, this is the be-all and end-all, but I do think it is the beginning.
Yeah, and I think it's building a rapport between the two leaders. I remember, you know, Tony Abbott had a very staged and a lot of hoopla and importance, all that pageantry when they went over there to negotiate the final stages of the free trade agreement to Beijing. I think you were on the trip there at the time, Dennis, but I mean, that was the last time we had that sort of entente cordiale between the neighbours, and yes. I think it's gone a little bit downhill since then, particularly on the economic front, and a lot of barbs and things thrown around in Australia. And of course, being able to speak frankly in the room is what Australia must do, but not necessarily retail it through the media, and I think the Prime Minister's played that one very well.